This is the Auditor, Clerk, Oversight, and Personnel Subcommittee. Would the clerk please call roll?
Counsel Getchia.
Here.
Counsel Robinson.
Here.
Counsel Rourke. Two present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This meeting has been called to discuss the city manager, city auditor, and city clerk's evaluation procedures. So what we'll do now is I'll turn it over to Councilor Robinson if he wants to go first, or I can state the reasoning why I put the motion in and try to go from there. We could start the conversation that way. It would be up to Councilor Robinson.
Yeah.
So the reason why I decided to just look at this is because on December, I think it was 7th, I got an email asking for us to do an evaluation. And the evaluation form, I didn't know when it was due. I saw that come January 1st was when raises came in, but I didn't have an outline on any of it. And then when I saw what the evaluation form was, I had also sent over to CFO Baldwin and asked, I don't really have answers to a lot of the things that they're asking. Like works to full potential is one of the qualities that is under the criterias on it. And I don't know that answer. As much as I enjoy everybody here, I don't work day to day with them, so I have to rely on the CFO, the city manager, someone else to help me out with that. Quality of work, I can dial in on some of the quality of work when we ask for something, but prior to that, I don't really have much answers to that. So going forward, I just thought it would only be fair to the employees, the city council, and everybody to have a performance evaluation in front of them and also be able to negotiate or have input from the employee at the same time as drawing out what are the goals for the performance measurements. So do the goals align with, does a goal and the objective align together? Are they realistic? Is it something that we can outline that would be really measurable? Because a lot of times what happens is when you start setting these things, they can be too ambiguous or they're too ambitious. Like you want to just end something, so you put, okay, we want no customer complaints. It's not realistic. So I think as we looked at other, and I looked at multitude of places, and I spoke to also Ms. Callery from the HR again, about how do we do other ordinance positions? How do we evaluate them? Is there a procedure that's put forward? So Councilor Rourke is also present. Sorry, Councilor Rourke, I didn't look up at the TV.
Just George, and so I'm late.
Thank you. So those are some of the things that we really wanted to dial in and try to make it more of a, okay, here's our goal, here's an objective, see if it's manageable within the employee's range, and try to figure out how are we going to come to common ground rather than just a satisfactory, unsatisfactory piece, grade it down. When I looked at one online for the Chelmsford town manager, I saw that there were 7 categories in 40 subset questions in between, and I'll give you a copy of it so you can look at. And it outlines different. We'll just go over the 7 categories. It says relationship with the select board, which obviously would be relationship with the city council. That's one subset, which has, one category which has 8 subsets to it. Fiscal management would have been another category, which has 4 subsets. Personal management, which has 8 subsets. Category 4 is organizational management, which has 7. Relationship with the public is category 5, which has another 8. Relationship, category 6, relationship with other government agencies. It has 3. And then category 7 is overall. So I just think that if we start looking, and I don't expect this to be solved by your team, obviously. I think the city council has to have a strong input on what direction do they want to go as we look forward. But I do thank the manager for allowing the CFO and also the human resource director to come in and sit down with us, because I think your input's important. How do we do this in between? Ordinance people obviously have a outline that you guys follow, and maybe we should get that shared to us so that we can see that also and dial off of that, which I do have in front of me. I'm sorry, I do have it in front of me. I just wanted to see what other people's thoughts were. You know, if everybody wants to stay with the same evaluation process, I personally can only put NA because I don't get to see some of these things. And another process is what triggers that raise? What percentage of vote triggers that? Positive evaluations triggers that? Is it 50%? Is it 2/3? Is it? How do we dial that in under a measurable piece? I haven't seen anything in writing that everybody's agreeable to. I think that sitting back and saying, all right, so how do we come to these conclusions as a city council, and how do we, and it's in fairness to the employees more so than to the city council, because if we want to have something measurable that we can actually track and make sure it's going in a positive direction, I think that performance evaluations are the only way to go. So with that being said, if Councilor Rourke has anything to add, I can go to Councilor Rourke, or I can give Councilor Robinson an opportunity, or even CFO Baldwin or Mary Calley from the Human Resource Office. So if anybody has any comments, we'll open it up to you guys and let you take off from there and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been doing it, I guess, for 8 years now. I come across that, every Tuesday is an evaluation for the manager, the clerk, the auditor. If we don't like something that they're doing, we can correct them at that point in time, which, has been done on this council as well as others. If someone wants to go more in depth, there are just some things that we cannot answer. But it's, if we have to do it, I have no problem with the way it's done now. Some small changes want to be made or added to it. I'm not going to go against that as well. But, I do appreciate that, every Tuesday, at least for the council's sake. And then we do make phone calls to, whether it be the manager's office or the auditor or to the clerk. If we don't get the answer that we want, or if it's delayed or something like that, we are more than free to bring it up at a public meeting. So I'm content with the way we do it now. But if if we want to make a couple of changes here and there, I'm also not going to go against that either. So with that being said, I'll just pass it along to Councilor Robinson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Rourke. Councilor Robinson.
Thank you. So one thing I like what Councilor Gitchia brought forward, how Chelmsford has pretty detailed evaluation form. Looking at the manager's contract, I think we have some guidance in there already. I think one of the things that stands out, a successful performance evaluation under this contract means no less than 75% of the goals agreed to have been met when evaluated. So that's kind of somewhat established in the manager's contract. Also, it does state that annually the council and manager shall define in writing the goals which they determine necessary for the city. The council shall further establish a relative priority among the goals. And so it's kind of saying that it's opening the door, I think, for us to come up with a evaluation form that both sides agree to. I think one thing I'd like to see is consistency across all three positions. So if we're going to come up with a detailed evaluation form on the manager position, I think we do the same for the clerk and the auditor as well. That way, we can evaluate. And I think it's the same thing. I think both parties should be in agreement on what we're looking for before we implement. I like the way I've looked at a bunch of sample evaluation forms that have used just nationwide in different roles in municipalities. And again, they break it down. A lot of them I'm seeing different categories. Individual characteristics is one, professional skills and status, and all these have subcategories. Relations with elected members of the governing body, policy execution, reporting, citizen relations, staffing, supervision, fiscal management, and community and evaluation. That's those evaluations. So that's another example of 7 main categories, and that could be broken down with subs in each of those. I think it just makes sense to have a thorough evaluation form, so then we can give credit where it's due. Whereas something that's standard, it's not necessarily going to show anything, especially when the contract's getting ready to expire or people are looking to stay longer, because now you have something to fall back as an employee, that your evaluations, you've been critiqued, the goals have been set and met. And so it kind of helps, I think, the employee as well. So I definitely would be open, and I would like to recommend maybe that's kind of a template or model we take into consideration. Seven main categories of evaluation that we can all get together and discuss, and break down a couple subs within each. And then once we come up with a form, that would apply, that format at least would apply to all three positions that the council is responsible for evaluating.
I just have a quick question to Ms. Callery or even CFO Baldwin. In the past, the manager's contracts were written the same way. It basically has a lot of the same language about performance evaluations. Do we have a copy of past performance evaluations, not just an evaluation sheet? Like we're seeing, and it's very different for the auditor than it is for the manager. And this really, it doesn't say like day-to-day operations. And in some cities and towns, their board will send out a questionnaire to the employees that work for the person that you're performance evaluating, hand them something, they'll fill it out, and it comes back to that board, and you get to see what the employees also are seeing. So it gives the employees some value also. But have we ever had a true performance evaluation? In your opinion, what's a performance evaluation for a manager prior to?
So, we're all like together. You guys hear me? So, Manager Lynch, he had, his contract. He had an actual evaluation. Manager Murphy did not have a contract. Manager Donahue, she had the same evaluation sheet as Mike and the auditor at that point in time. And then now we're here with Manager Golden. And the contracts, well, some have contracts, some don't, and the wording is different. As far as the benefits and stuff, that might be the same, but some of the other wording is a little bit different. Would you agree?
CFO Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to join you tonight. So I've been here for some time and have worked for a number of city managers, and as Ms. Callery mentioned, each is different and governed by their specific contractual or relationship with the council or not. And so it's hard to say that there's a standard amongst each. When former manager Bernie Lynch was employed by the council, his contract did have more specific criteria for goals and objectives that is similar to the contract with the current city manager. And at that time, and I think this may be useful guidance for the subcommittee in terms of making a recommendation to the council for moving forward in terms of establishing these goals, is to maybe exercise some sort of formal process for setting those higher-arching goals that govern beneath it. And this is just as the subcommittee was discussing a moment ago, more standard measures of achieving those goals. And so I have just on my notes here some of our materials from when former manager Lynch would go through the performance evaluation process. And I'll just use examples here. Some of the sort of overarching goals were education, financial management, economic development, and those are the big picture items. But below those were a set of goals, and I have an example here. So goal number 1, the City of Lowell will operate as a best practice and customer-focused government, employing progressive policies and embracing new technologies. Whenever doing so will increase the efficacy and efficiency of public service delivery. So below that goal were certain objectives. Objective A, become more customer-focused and friendly. Objective B, increase the efficiency of city operations while providing quality public services. Objective C, recruit and maintain a talented, well-trained workforce. And so by establishing that, and that would be something that the council would have input in creating this sort of structure, take a vote, which I believe is a component of the current city manager's contract. And then the manager, during the evaluation process, would come forward with measures and indicators of meeting those specific objectives, goals, and policy measures at the high level. And that would be the basis upon which the council could evaluate the chief executive. As it relates to the auditor and the clerk, it's typically functioned in a more informal way over the years. The past council, previous to this one, did take a vote to shift some of the day-to-day responsibility for the city auditor from the council to the manager. And that, in keeping with the Plan E form of government, there's still, the council is the appointing authority for the clerk, the auditor, the city manager. But some of that, to the point of the chairman, it's not necessarily the council that sees the day-to-day operations of those individuals. And so, certainly I'm happy to answer any questions or provide information as it relates to the auditor, because she is a key member of the financial team. And if there were some similar sort of process to establish goals, I would only recommend or suggest that maybe they fall in line with the certain responsibilities of the city auditor under statute, whether it's certain timing of submitting reports to the Department of Revenue, certain audits that are performed, periodic operational audits of departments. But those things that are the key responsibilities of the auditor, whether it's the Schedule A, the balance sheet submission to the Department of Revenue, the tax rate recap, which is a collaborative effort with the other finance officials, that those might be the guiding objectives for establishing some kind of performance rubric for the council. So, thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Clerk.
If I may, I agree with what's been said on the from my position. I agree with saying let's establish a form, and myself or whoever the clerk is in the body, establish a form, come up with those, because you've got to understand, you've got to have things that I interact with you on, and I need things that I interact with myself on, but I'm in a different ballpark, I believe, than the manager, because the manager's job description is way more breadth than and he has a contract. So that's kind of differentiated. So I don't think my form should be the same as a manager's form. You know what I'm saying? It should be something we work out between the body and going forward. I mean, my basic thing is this legislative and public and attending to the public, basically, and oversight of my office. So, but I agree with, there's an issue that we have the form, we do the evaluation, I'm input, your input, and we move on. But I don't think mine should be a little different than what the manager does, and I think that's obvious to everybody. And like I said, there's none of some of the duties have been taken over from the auditor just by vote, but it's still planning, and we make a form up, we move on, and we evaluate. If that makes any sense.
It makes total sense, and I think you're 100% right. See, what I did is I've been looking at this stuff, trying to research. Okay, I looked at the town of Amherst, Massachusetts. They have basically what Chelmsford has, but theirs is a little bit outlined differently. They have more of a public input on some of the things. But I also had Councilor Scott had sent over something also to say, UNC School of Government talks about city clerks and talks about it's a different performance evaluation than the others, and I would agree with that. And I would agree with CFO Baldwin said it would have to be 3 totally different evaluations, because you're looking at one's a schedule of performances based off of reporting, and one has more of vital stuff. And again, I won't go over that way, but the manager's is totally different. His is interacting, financial stability. You look at some of the things they have as policy goals in Amherst, which is totally different than Lowell, but it's just an outline to look at. Some of theirs is the policy goal is climate action, economic vitality. four major capital investments. Like we talk about the bond ratings and stuff like that, and what do we need, and how do we outline what we're doing in performance that way? Because it would be easier to measure it at this than every time we come up with another question, someone comes across and says, oh, this will affect the bond rating, but you would know it at this point because it would be part of the evaluation process. Race, equity, and social injustices would be part of it. And whether we all want to see that or we don't want to see that, it's just part of the makeup of the world right now. Administration, leadership, and personnel. Finance, long-term vision, like the CFO outlined, community engagement. Relationship with the city council. So I do agree with everything everybody has said. And I do understand what Councilor Rourke is saying every week is a way of evaluating somebody. But there are some things that we don't understand that we're actually trying to evaluate that can be a side set that we don't even really need to say at a city council because we're seeing it reported. Free cash. Do we need to know, okay, there's a deadline. Is it a reasonable deadline? You start obviously would December be a good deadline for that to be done? And the CFO and the auditor would come in and say, yeah, that's reasonable to do in the beginning. But then if we see we can move it to November and make it a more efficient government, then we just try to play with this thing as we move along. But it has to be agreeable to the employees at the same time. That's how performance evaluations are measured. But I truly didn't think that the evaluation process, the sheet itself, not to go against what Councilor Rourke is saying, the sheet itself was very fair to me as I don't know. How do you really put satisfactory, unsatisfactory, good or excellent on honesty? I don't know those integrity. I mean, that's, again, it's such a vague piece that how does it get put together? So I really think if we spend a little bit of time on this, each one basically with each employee as a measurable board, and we come up and say, okay, do some homework, come back with us on what you think the evaluation tool, provide these from Amherst, provide it from Chelmsford, and provide whatever one they want to look at and come back and say, are some of these things measurable? And when we talk about some of those things, we already do it, but we're not getting credit for it. We're getting credit in quality of work. That's where the manager gets credit for it. And if you're not watching the council meeting on April 8th, you don't even know that we're judging your quality of work off of that. But with a write-up like this and an evaluation tool like this, you could look at personal management and say, communicates organizational values, direction, and expectations. How does the manager do that? And you could write in there as anybody want on April 8th, he spoke on this or that, and he's been doing great on this or that, he or she. Organizational management maintains an organization-wide strategic planning process. It's very vague. So what do we do as a council to shrink it down and actually make it attainable so we all understand it? Because right now that it's so vague that anybody really truly can fit anything in there and say yes or no to it. I don't know how we move forward with it. I think that we have to invite each employee in with HR and the CFO and say, okay, let's convene and meet again and give it maybe a 2-week period and say, okay, can people dial in what they think? And realistically, maybe 39 subcategories is way too much for a starting point. You start small, and then as years go on and you start evaluating and say, okay, let's add this or delete this. It has to be a working document. It can't be fair to an employee that you're just going to throw 39 things on and say, next year I want you to meet all these goals. And I don't know if the subcommittee would be okay with convening a meeting in 2 weeks in a motion to maybe send it back to each one of the employees and say, look at this and come back to us. This isn't something that needs to be done in a month because we're already by this year. The process of evaluation is the process of evaluation right now. Whether we get it done in 6 months or not, I think it's a good topic to talk about and try to evaluate. And if the employees are okay with it and the city council is okay with it, I think that works.
Yeah,
Clerk, Gary.
I think that the process would, if we're going to forward that process, like each of us give us an opportunity. I'll get in touch with you, Eric, when I'm kind of ready to sit down with the board, whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is, when I'm ready to sit down with the subcommittee and go over that thing. Let me gather some information, think about it, and I'll say, okay, let's just schedule a meeting on that thing. So just kind of keep this one open, I guess, and so it doesn't have to directly get referred to you. So we just put it on, we mark it up, and go from there.
What I would do in your case, because there's a conflict of interest with me, and,
Oh, yeah.
and I want to say that straight out, is allow
Oh, yeah.
City Clerk Gary to either reach out to Councilor Rourke or Councilor Robinson and have that conversation back and forth, and then try to outline a process. But I just handed Councilor Robinson Amherst, and he said, I like that. So, and I think the employees will like it. It's more based than calling, Auditor Oaks up. And I said to her, I don't know what to say to you. I got to put an NA, and I think you're a phenomenal employee, but I don't know these answers. And then I reached out to CFO Baldwin and said, can you help me here? But again, it's secondhand when I write it with his words on it. And I think some of the things is attendance, I don't know. I would assume everybody's here, but I don't know that answer. And we've had questionable things in the past on attendance stuff, and that's why they're with the CFO. And I think that we just need to, what is the process? So, Councilor Rourke, did you have something to add? The screen went big.
Oh, no, like I said, I'm willing to do whatever the subcommittee wants to do, and I got no problem, like I said, with the way it is now, or if you want to make some changes, that's fine too. So I'd love to be able to sit down with our city clerk and drill him down with 47 different subcategories.
I know a spot where we can do it.
Councilor Robinson.
One of the things too that we have to be mindful of is, and I think that's the direction we're going is whatever we end up coming up with for ideas of evaluation, the employee has to sign off. So it's not like a subcommittee's gonna say this is what you're gonna have to be evaluated on.
You'll get your best results like that.
Yeah, well, and if you look, even in the manager's contract, that is one of the things in the contract. Is
Yep.
that both parties have to be agreeable to what the criteria is going to be. So I think it's only fair. Anyone the council is going to be evaluating, it should be the same way. But both parties agree. This is the evaluation form. Once we get to that, and go forward with that.
So before we adjourn, I will give Human Resource Director Callery a copy of the Amherst one and also Chelmsford, and the one that Councilor Scott had sent me from UNC on the clerk stuff. So you can send it to Auditor Oaks and also to Clerk Geary and CFO Baldwin and just say, okay, and again, this is just something to look at. If you find something that's better to use as a guide, certainly use it. And I think you also to the manager. I think it should go to the manager and see what he thinks on his evaluation sheets on, which one they'd like to sit down with it. And then we maybe set 1 week for the auditor to come in and talk about it. And we have an outline prior to a subcommittee, and then sit down with the clerk before and say, okay, here's the outline before, and also the manager. And I think it's just something that, I was just amazed that when I got it, I didn't even know it was coming. It came from Auditor Oates, and she said, could you please fill this out? And I didn't even know that I had to return it, but I have it here for you. So again, I thank everybody for spending their Thursday night with us. And if no one has anything else, I would take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Councilor Robinson, seconded by Councilor Rourke. All in favor? Good night. Thanks, Councilor Rourke.